Welcome to Mike for Men with your host, Mike Huey. Mike shares real talks for real men who want to make a real impact. In today's episode, Mike asked his network of people who are at least 50 years old, if you could give one piece of advice to your 25-year-old self, what would it be? And now, your host, Mike Huey.
If you're in your 20s or 30s, you've probably already had the thought, boy, if I was back in junior high or high school, I wish I could have told myself to do this, right? And when you're in junior high or high school, you don't even know what you should be even asking, let alone what you'll think 25 or 35 years old or anything like that. And so one of the things I thought to myself was, I wanted to ask a lot of my peers, a lot of my network, people that are in their 50s, if you could go back and tell your 25-year-old self, your 30-year-old self something, what would you want to tell them? And so I thought, man, this was a great time for me to share from you from over 25 people who have shared. This is what, if you're in your 20s or 30s, things that you should really be thinking about or considering. These are all advice from, again, people in their 50s who've been there, done that, and going on with life. But the number one thing that I want to encourage, and many of you may already be there because you're in your 20s or 30s, but two people, both Michelle, a project manager, and Angela, a housewife, said, finish the degree. That was like number one, finish the degree. If you have not finished college, I want to encourage you to go back and do that. That's like the biggest thing they would have recommended. Going on, though, I want to talk to you about some things around people. All right. So number one, Freddie, who's a machinist, said, don't waste time on people or pursuits that take you away from creating and living the best version of yourself. Right. We always get sidetracked with wanting to impress people or do things. Man, if it's not helping you become a better version of yourself, don't do it, right? Steve, a former Navy sailor, and now he's a current pastor, said, failure doesn't make you a loser, quitting does. So true. Leave places better than you found them. Maybe I'll talk about that some other time, but I really want you to zero in on this one. Serving people to get their money will fill your quota, but serving people to find what they need and meeting their needs will make you rich. Great words of advice on our orientation towards other people. Lenny, who's a trainer for airline employees, said, make getting along with people your main focus. It seems like when you're in your 20s or 30s, your main focus is making a living. Your main focus is getting ahead with finances. Your main focus is finding a spouse. Your main focus is raising the kids. I agree with him. Make getting along with people your main focus. Because if you can get along with your spouse, get along with your kids, get along with your boss, get along with your client, I'm telling you, life really does change. John, who's a business manager, says letting people intimidate you is extremely counterproductive. It usually means people are afraid you'll surpass them. Boy, did I find that out when I went to a reunion once. I was like, wow, the people that were the bullies in high school, they were definitely not the leaders of the class 30 years later. So I want to really encourage you with that. Gail, who's a service department manager, said, talk to your parents more often. Maybe that's because she is a parent of adult children, but the reality is we could all probably talk to our parents more often. That's a great piece of advice. Glenn, who's a professional speaker, a little lighthearted, but I think there's a little bit of aspect of truth to this, said, be sure to put weekly neck rubs in your vows. My wife and I, we give each other foot rubs or massages or something like that. But the idea, getting back to getting along with people and serving people, make that your main focus, especially in a marriage environment, and you'll have a much better success rate. In fact, Melissa, who's a senior care property manager, she said don't even get married till you're 40. So there's a lot of aspects about really being selective with your spouse. Just because they're hot, just because you get along, you're really attracted to each other, doesn't necessarily mean it's a great spouse for you. So I really want to encourage you to look at that. The third area I want to talk about, and it's a good transition here, Tony, who's a property manager, said, don't go into debt with school loans But do go on mission trips like with YWAM. Don't get absorbed in politics or news because your friends that do that uh, are going to become lost souls. So I want to talk a little bit about finance here. Don't go into debt with student loans, or if you are in debt, get out as rapidly as you can. Here's another one where multiple people said the same thing. Kevin, who's an IT consultant. Heather, who is, if you haven't seen earlier, she spoke. She was one of my guests on an earlier talk on real estate investing. She's a real estate agent. And Deneva, who's also a real estate agent, said save and invest money from every paycheck. When you're in your 20s, save and invest the money from every paycheck. Those are not savings for events. They're not even savings for emergencies. You do need to have an emergency account, stuff like that. And there is a talk I did on why you don't have enough money. So I want to encourage you to go back and look at that. But save for your financial freedom. Save for getting to the point where your finances are making more money for you than what you make on your job. So again, multiple people save money out of every paycheck. Fourth area, I want to transition. Sue, who is a president of a company that does food recycling, said kids are a small fraction of your life, so don't live just for them. Work for an impact that is greater than yourself, and money will follow. That is definitely true. And so want to really encourage you. I know that if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s or early 30s, kids take up so much of our time and we think that's the whole thing. But the reality is I wish I had that time back with my kids. Now my kids are grown, gone, married, and having grandkids themselves. So the point, well, they're my grandkids, they're their kids, but the point is, it is a small fraction of time, and so don't just live for them. Think what is going to be the impact of your life. Larry, who's he's a world traveler and a missionary, he says, keep an open mind. The world is big and wonderful. Don't worry, it's going to be great, which is true. Chris, who's a pastor in an inner city church here in Minneapolis, said, live well every moment. Live well every moment. So again, getting back to what Sue said, work for an impact. Live well. Steve, who works with people with addiction, said, don't do anything during the day that will keep you awake at night, right? Those are just great pieces of advice. Nicole, who works in home health, said, don't take life so seriously and laugh a lot more. Always give yourself permission not to finish books that don't grab you. I want to tell you, there's a lot of great books out there. And so if you're 20, 30 pages in and you're not captured, one of the best time-saving things we can do is chuck that book and get another one. Same's true with movies. If movies haven't captured your attention in the first, where you don't think this is a good movie in the first 20 minutes, save your time. So great pieces of advice there. Terry, who's a partner in an import business, said buy a cabin on the lake. That would be one thing he would tell himself. My wife said build your life in a warm climate, because we're in Minnesota, and at the time of this recording, we're just coming out of a deep freeze. And my son, who now lives in Texas, said the same thing. He said, take your wife and move south. So that's a little bit of a fun thing. But nevertheless, Kim, who's a mom, said, have fun, be brave, and don't let the past define you. So those are ideas around some of those relationships and living life to the fullness. Steph, who's works with college students, and she's helping them with life skills and their spiritual life and their intellectual life and their relational life, has been given her life to people in college. Steph said, be careful giving advice when you haven't been in that person's shoes. You aren't as smart as you think you are. For me, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I thought I was pretty smart. If you're listening to this and you're in that age group and you think you're smart, I really want to encourage you with that piece of advice that Steph would say. You're not as smart as you think you are. In fact, Jim, who's one of my very first bosses in life, back when I was a teenager, his thing was, I would tell myself, you don't know it all. Tom, who's a high school teacher, said, ask for what you want more often. And that's one of the clues that you can see. If you think you're a know-it-all, you rarely ask questions. If you're asking questions, that means you're remaining as a student. So I just want to encourage you to put up a mirror and ask yourself, are you asking a lot of questions? Or are you if you're not, you're probably thinking you're a know-it-all, or you're not asking for what you want and you're being too timid. So that's what Tom would say. Mary, who works in the customer service, said failure is not an end, it's a new beginning. And I would say amen to that. There have been many times in life you will fail. Things will fall apart. Job ventures will not quite work out right. Things that you tried to accomplish failed. You just learn from it and start again. Last two things on spiritual life I wanted to share with you. Ernie, who's a real estate agent in Florida, said if I could go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I would say be more serious about God. Read the Proverbs one every day and grow more and more wise as each year passes. Love that piece of advice. And Mary Jane, who I went to high school with, she's now a patient care advocate. I want to wrap it up with her comment. Start each day with your Bible. Those are some pieces of advice that have come from my network of people who, if they could say, man, if I could talk to my 25-year-old self, this is what I would share with myself. Hopefully that helps inspire you. Again, the world needs you. It needs your love. We talked a lot about these relationships. And if you follow a lot of these pieces of advice, by the time you're in your 50s, I'm telling you, you will have a great legacy.
Thank you for listening to Mike for Men. If you enjoyed listening to this in a podcast, please subscribe and give us a review. If you are watching this video, please subscribe and click the bell below so you will know when the next episode comes out. If there is a topic you would like Mike or his guests to address, please write them in the comments section below. Again, thank you for listening.